In the heart of Persia, in a land where mountains touched the skies and rivers sang through golden fields, there lived a king named Khosrow. He was a ruler known not only for his strength and wisdom, but also for a heart that quietly yearned for something beyond crowns and battles. His kingdom was vast and prosperous, yet within the palace walls, Khosrow often felt the solitude of a man who had everything, yet lacked the one thing he could not command: love. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber, a messenger arrived at the palace. He carried news that would ripple through Khosrow's life like a sudden wind. A princess from the distant kingdom of Armenia, Shirin, was to visit the Persian court. Her beauty was legendary, whispered about in every market, every caravan, and every palace along the way. But more than her beauty, it was said that Shirin possessed a mind both sharp and gentle, a soul capable of seeing truth beyond appearances. She was a jewel among women, radiant, humble, and full of grace. When Khosrow first saw Shirin at the palace gate, he was struck not merely by her beauty, though it was undeniable, but by the quiet strength in her eyes. Her gaze met his for a fleeting moment, and something unspoken passed between them, a spark that could not be measured, a promise that their lives were entwined even before words were exchanged. For Khosrow, who had always commanded respect through power, this encounter felt different. Here was someone he did not wish to command, but simply to understand, to know. Shirin, for her part, was polite but reserved. She had traveled far and had been cautious of the intentions of kings. She had heard tales of Khosrow's grandeur and charm, yet she remained wary, knowing that appearances could deceive. When she first approached him, she bowed with humility, but her eyes, steady and calm, showed she was not easily swayed by status or wealth. Over the following days, Khosrow sought her company under the guise of courtly discussions and cultural exchanges. They spoke of poetry, of rivers and mountains, of the lives of ordinary people within the kingdom. Khosrow found himself fascinated by her insights, the gentle way she noticed small details others overlooked, the compassion she carried like an invisible crown. And Shirin, in turn, was drawn to his sincerity. Though he was a king, there was an honesty to him, a warmth beneath the layers of royal duty that she could sense, and it made her heart stir in ways she had not expected. Yet, as often happens with matters of the heart, shadows lingered. Khosrow had advisors who watched his growing attachment with unease. "My king," one advisor warned, "a foreign princess may be flattered by your attention, but she belongs to another realm. Do not let your heart lead you into trouble." Khosrow nodded, yet he could not quell the pull he felt toward Shirin. Love, he realized, was not something a king could summon or control. It came without asking, without permission, and it demanded the courage to accept its power. One evening, as the full moon rose above the palace gardens, Khosrow and Shirin walked together along a quiet pathway lined with flowering trees. The air was fragrant with jasmine, and the silver moonlight danced upon the flowing fountains. They spoke little, yet the silence between them was full of understanding. At one point, Shirin looked up and asked, softly, "Do you ever wonder if fate has a hand in the paths we take, Khosrow?" Khosrow paused, considering her words. "I do," he admitted. "Yet I have learned that fate is not always clear. Sometimes it is a whisper, and sometimes it is a storm." Shirin smiled faintly, sensing the truth in his statement. She did not yet realize how deeply her own fate was entwined with his, but the seed of something profound had been planted. And in that quiet moment, beneath the moon's soft glow, both felt the stirring of a bond neither fully understood, but both could not deny. As the night deepened, Khosrow escorted Shirin back to her chambers. Standing at the doorway, he said, Tomorrow I hope we can speak again." Shirin inclined her head gracefully. "If it pleases you, my king," she replied. And yet, in her heart, she wondered if the world outside the palace walls might yet come between them, if duty, misunderstanding, or the whispers of others might test the fragile thread that had begun to tie their hearts together. Little did they know that their meeting was not merely a chance encounter. Their lives were being drawn toward one another, like rivers converging into the same sea. What began as curiosity and admiration would soon grow into a love that challenged kingdoms, stirred jealousy, and demanded choices no mortal heart could easily bear. And so, beneath the quiet stars of Persia, the first chapter of Khosrow and Shirin's story unfolded, a tale of longing, of gentle attraction, and of hearts daring to dream beyond the walls of duty and expectation. The days that followed Shirin's arrival in Persia were filled with moments both tender and tense. Khosrow found his thoughts drifting to her constantly, her laughter like a soft melody in his ears, the way her eyes seemed to notice the small details others overlooked. Yet with every glance and every conversation, he felt the invisible weight of courtly scrutiny. His advisors watched his every move, ready to caution him against distracting attachments, while whispers began to circulate in the palace halls about the king's growing fascination with the foreign princess. Shirin, too, struggled with her own feelings. Though she found comfort in Khosrow's sincerity, she was mindful of her position and the expectations placed upon her. She had been raised to honor her family, to respect alliances, and to guard her heart against impulsive emotions. The warmth she felt toward Khosrow was undeniable, yet she feared it could lead to consequences neither of them had anticipated. So, while she laughed at his jokes and engaged in long discussions under the rose-scented garden skies, she maintained a careful distance, reminding herself that appearances mattered in a world governed by duty and politics. It was during one such evening that the first shadow fell over their budding bond. A messenger arrived from a neighboring kingdom with urgent news. Khosrow's cousin, a nobleman named Shapur, was pressing a claim to part of the kingdom. Shapur was ambitious and cunning, and he sought to exploit any perceived weakness in Khosrow's rule. The king was forced to leave the palace for a council of advisors, leaving Shirin in the quiet of the gardens, her thoughts restless and uneasy. Though the council resolved the matter swiftly, Shirin could sense a change in Khosrow's demeanor. He returned later that evening, his brow furrowed and his hands restless. When he approached her in the moonlit courtyard, Shirin asked gently, "Has something troubled you, my king?" Khosrow smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. Troubled, perhaps, but the matters of kings are often like storms on distant seas, loud, frightening, yet sometimes passing without harm. Shirin nodded, yet she could feel the tension between them. The simple joy of their conversations seemed harder to reach. Khosrow, who had previously been candid and open, now spoke with careful words as if measuring each syllable. Shirin, sensing the subtle shift, wondered whether the distance between them was growing, whether the warmth they had felt might be cooled by circumstance. Then an event occurred that would test the strength of their connection. One afternoon, a rumor spread through the court that Shirin had caught the attention of another nobleman, a wealthy and influential courtier who sought her favor. Khosrow, hearing this, felt an unfamiliar pang of jealousy, a sharp, burning sensation he had never experienced before. His mind raced, imagining Shirin's heart belonging to someone else, and for a brief moment, reason and duty were overshadowed by a storm of emotion. Yet when Khosrow confronted Shirin about the rumors, her calmness and honesty disarmed him. "Khosrow, I am here by the will of my family, and I have no desire to entertain anyone's courtship. You need not fear what is not real."
Her words, filled with quiet dignity, reminded him of why he had been drawn to her in the first place. But even as relief washed over him, he could not ignore the fragile nature of their trust. Misunderstandings, however small, seemed poised to challenge the bond that was only beginning to form. As the weeks passed, Khosrow and Shirin found solace in small, secret moments. They met in the palace gardens at dawn when the dew sparkled like diamonds on the grass, and spoke of dreams that stretched beyond the walls of the palace. Khosrow confessed his fears, admitting that he had rarely known a connection so deep. Shirin, in turn, revealed her longing for a life where she could love freely, without the constraints of duty or expectation. In these moments, their hearts spoke the language of understanding, and the palace walls seemed to disappear around them. But even in these private exchanges, the reality of their positions could not be ignored. Shirin's family had intentions and plans, and Khosrow's court remained watchful. Political pressures loomed like distant thunderclouds, threatening to unleash storms that could separate them forever. The lovers could only cling to fleeting moments, knowing that each day brought both the beauty of intimacy and the anxiety of uncertainty. One evening, as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, Khosrow took Shirin's hand in his, a rare gesture in public view. He whispered, "I wish the world could be simpler, where hearts could speak freely and no one else could interfere." Shirin squeezed his hand gently. "Perhaps one day it will be. For now, let us cherish what we have, even in secret. Our hearts can speak without walls if we allow them to." And so, beneath the silver glow of the Persian moon, Khosrow and Shirin's hearts drew closer, bound by admiration, trust, and an unspoken promise. They knew the path ahead would not be easy. Misunderstandings, external pressures, and the complex webs of royal duty awaited them. But these quiet moments, they discovered a truth stronger than fear, that love, even when challenged by the world, could find its way through the smallest openings, like sunlight piercing the darkest clouds. As the night deepened and the palace settled into silence, Khosrow and Shirin parted with a lingering glance, each carrying the warmth of the other's presence in their heart. The trials were only beginning, but their bond, fragile yet determined, had taken root. And though they could not see it yet, the coming days would test the limits of their love, demanding courage, sacrifice, and a faith in one another that neither had ever known before.
The days turned into weeks, and the quiet bond between Khosrow and Shirin deepened, yet the palace's walls seemed to close in around them with every passing moment. Though their hearts were tethered to one another, the eyes of others never slept. Rumors, whispers, and the ambitions of those who wished to manipulate both the king and the princess created a web of tension that neither could escape. One afternoon, a visiting ambassador from a distant land arrived at the palace. He brought gifts and messages of goodwill, but he also carried a subtle warning. "My king," he said in a hushed tone, "alliances can be fragile, and hearts, even those of royalty, can cause unrest. Be cautious in matters of affection. One small misstep could have great consequences." Khosrow listened, but his thoughts drifted to Shirin. He was no stranger to diplomacy or politics, yet in the realm of the heart he felt powerless. The ambassador's words, though innocent in intent, planted a seed of unease in his mind, a worry that perhaps love could not coexist with the demands of kingship. Meanwhile, Shirin herself faced pressures of her own. Her family, protective yet politically aware, began hinting that her presence in Persia should serve the interests of alliances, not the personal desires of the king. They reminded her of the duties expected of a princess and the fragility of a king's favor.
Though Shirin's feelings for Khosrow were true and deep, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest, making every choice heavy with consequence. It was in this climate of tension that the first great misunderstanding occurred. Khosrow, hearing a distorted report from a jealous courtier, was led to believe that Shirin had accepted the attention of another nobleman in secret. He confronted her with a heart full of worry and anger, unable to reconcile the image of the woman he loved with the rumors he had been told. Shirin, shocked and hurt by the accusation, tried to explain. "Khosrow, you must believe me. I have never entertained another's attention. My heart belongs to you alone." But Khosrow, his pride and emotions tangled, struggled to accept her words. "Shirin, I am hearing reports from those around us. How can I know the truth when I see what others claim?" His voice trembled, a mixture of longing and fear. Shirin's eyes welled with tears, not from anger, but from the deep ache of misunderstanding. She had come to love Khosrow fully, yet the very bond she cherished was being tested by whispers and half-truths. "You must trust me," she whispered. "If we cannot trust, then what is love worth?" Khosrow wanted to believe her, but the seed of doubt had taken root. He left her that evening with a heavy heart, the corridors of the palace echoing the emptiness he felt. Shirin remained in her chamber, tears streaking her face, wondering if love could survive a world so full of intrigue and suspicion. As days passed, both tried to endure their pain. Khosrow immersed himself in the affairs of the kingdom, yet every decision, every counsel, every celebration reminded him of the space Shirin once filled beside him. Shirin, in turn, dedicated herself to the care of the people, charitable acts, and the quiet arts, all the while longing for the presence of the man she loved. Then tragedy struck. A messenger arrived with news from Shirin's homeland. Her family demanded that she return immediately, citing political necessity. They warned that any delay could endanger their own standing. Shirin was torn. She loved Khosrow, but she could not defy her family without severe consequences. Khosrow, hearing of her departure from another source, misunderstood the situation once again. Consumed by anger and heartbreak, he assumed she was leaving of her own accord, that she no longer cared for him. In a moment of despair, he withdrew from the public eye, and his advisors, sensing his vulnerability, began pushing him toward decisions he might not otherwise have made. Shirin, standing on the palace balcony on the morning of her departure, looked out over the city she had come to love and thought of Khosrow. She longed to see him one last time, to explain, to hold his hand, but the misunderstanding had grown too great. As the carriage carrying her away rolled through the palace gates, she whispered to the wind, "May you hear me, Khosrow. My heart is yours, now and always." Khosrow, watching from his tower, saw only the retreating carriage and felt the loneliness so deep it ached in his chest. He had misjudged, misheard, and allowed suspicion to cloud the truth. In that moment, he realized how fragile love could be, how easily it could be threatened by fear and pride. The palace, once filled with laughter and shared glances, now felt like a cage. Every corner seemed to echo Shirin's absence. Khosrow wandered through the gardens where they had once walked, imagining her hand in his, the gentle rise of her laughter, the warmth of her gaze. He knew that the misunderstanding, compounded by duty and circumstance, had driven them apart, but he also knew that his heart would never let her go. And so, the story reached its darkest moment. Khosrow, the powerful king, was powerless in the face of love lost through miscommunication. Shirin, the radiant princess, was carried away by duty even as her heart clung desperately to the memory of him. Both were trapped by forces beyond their control, and both carried a sorrow that would shape their choices in the days to come. The seeds of tragedy were sown. What began as love had been tested by jealousy, misunderstanding, and the weight of responsibility. And yet, even in their separation, a quiet hope lingered, an unspoken promise that hearts so entwined might yet find a way to reunite even amidst the shadows of fate.
The roads of Persia stretched long and winding as Shirin's carriage carried her away from the palace, leaving behind the life she had begun to cherish. Each mile that separated her from Khosrow felt like a physical ache, a reminder that love could be constrained by duty and misunderstanding. She looked out at the passing landscapes, the rolling hills, sparkling rivers, and flowering valleys, and in each one saw echoes of the moments she had shared with him. The early morning walks in the garden, the quiet conversations under the stars, the laughter that had felt like sunlight warming the palace walls. Khosrow, meanwhile, remained within the palace, haunted by her absence. Days and nights merged into one long, restless vigil as he wandered the halls, replaying every word, every glance, every unspoken hesitation. He realized that his pride and the whispers of others had blinded him to the truth of Shirin's devotion. He had let fear and doubt drive a wedge between them, and now, as he faced the emptiness of the palace, he understood the full weight of his mistake. Determined to reconcile, Khosrow sent word through trusted messengers to Shirin's homeland, seeking permission for her to return. He wrote letters filled with honesty and humility, letters that spoke not of his power as a king, but of the longing in his heart, the deep respect he held for her, and the love that had never wavered. Each message carried his plea that she might forgive the misunderstandings and allow their hearts to reunite. Shirin, receiving the letters, felt both relief and sorrow. Relief because Khosrow's words mirrored the love she had carried quietly all along. Sorrow because so much time had been lost and so much pain endured. She read and reread the letters, tracing the king's words with her fingers as though she could feel the heartbeat behind them. And in the stillness of her chamber, she made a decision. She would return to Persia, to the man whose heart had become hers, despite all obstacles. The journey back was fraught with anxiety. Would Khosrow truly welcome her after the misunderstandings? Could their love survive the shadows that had fallen between them? Yet the hope that had endured in her heart guided each step, and she resolved to trust the bond they had once shared. Upon her arrival, the palace erupted with quiet anticipation. Courtiers whispered, guards prepared the gates, and the air seemed to shimmer with the weight of expectation. Khosrow, standing in the grand hall, felt a mixture of fear and longing. His heart raced as the doors opened and Shirin stepped forward. She was as radiant as the day they had first met, yet her eyes held the depth of one who had suffered and endured. For a moment, they simply looked at one another, the distance of weeks melting away in a single heartbeat. Khosrow took a step forward, then another, until he reached her side. "Shirin," he said, his voice trembling, "I have been a fool. I let doubt and fear rule where only love should have guided me. Can you forgive me?" Shirin, moved by the sincerity in his eyes, smiled softly. "Khosrow, love is not without trials. We have faced them, and though the path has been difficult, my heart has never wavered. I forgive you."
In that moment, the palace seemed to hold its breath, as though the very walls celebrated the reunion of two hearts destined for one another. Khosrow gently took Shirin's hands in his, feeling the warmth and life within them, and for the first time in many weeks, a sense of peace settled over him. It was not the peace of duty or triumph, but the quiet, enduring peace of two souls finding each other after the storms of misunderstanding and separation. Yet even in their reunion, they knew that the world around them could not be ignored. Khosrow vowed to protect Shirin not as a possession, but as the equal and cherished partner she had always been. Shirin, in turn, pledged her loyalty not out of obligation, but out of love that had grown stronger through hardship. Together, they navigated the delicate balance of heart and duty, learning that love was both a sanctuary and a responsibility. Days turned to months, and life in the palace regained a rhythm of harmony. Khosrow and Shirin walked the gardens together, discussed the affairs of the kingdom side by side, and shared quiet moments that needed no words. Each smile, each glance was a testament to the resilience of their bond, proof that true love could survive misunderstanding, distance, and the trials imposed by fate. Their story, though marked by sorrow and challenge, became a legend whispered through the courts and marketplaces of Persia, a tale of two hearts that had found each other against the odds, of longing and patience, of heartbreak transformed into enduring devotion. And so, under the skies of Persia, where rivers flowed and mountains rose like sentinels, Khosrow and Shirin finally found the happiness they had sought, not in the absence of trials, but in the courage to face them together. Their love, tempered by misunderstanding and time, shone brighter for all they had endured, a gentle and enduring flame in a world often shadowed by doubt. In the quiet of the palace, under the soft glow of lanterns and moonlight, Khosrow whispered, "We have been tested, Shirin, and yet here we stand, and I vow nothing will ever pull us apart again." Shirin rested her head against his shoulder, her heart full. "Together, always," she murmured, and in that simple promise the legend of Khosrow and Shirin found its eternal home, a story of love that could withstand the trials of the world and hearts that refused to let go even in the face of fate.